now you're in trouble, you've got 75 minutes. So I guess in the room, who here feels that they've got the best template? Oh, look at that, it loves me. Whew. Who here in the room thinks their template is optimized for their business right now? Oh, the Fulton Trotter guys. We haven't changed it in 4 years, guys. So from my perspective, this presentation is the fundamental as to why you're here to start with. Without your template being set up properly, it's like kind of failing to plan is a planning to fail scenario, okay? So I want you to listen in this session about all the things I have to talk about, but then second to that, I also want you to then take in the other 11 sessions that we're talking about over the next 2 days, because those sessions actually contribute to the building of your template. Okay, so it's very important to remember that. It must be the Melbourne weather. All right. So the challenges of a template is much kind of like a game of chess. Okay. Now, are there any chess masters in the room? No. All right, so how many of us are amateurs? Amateur chess players or never played chess before? Or actually, who's never played chess before? Oh gosh, all right, we're not gonna pull those out. As I said, this isn't a geek fest. But an amateur playing a game of chess, you're constantly only thinking 1 or 2 moves ahead, okay? When you play a chess or a chess champion or a chess master, they've thought through about 10 steps ahead before they make that first move. So in developing your template for your practice, you need to have a strong understanding of not only where your business is today, which is your first step, but you also have to have a strong understanding of where your business is going to in the future. Without that thought and insight and thinking, essentially you're going to fall over. So it's essentially you're developing a template that you may have to rebuild, and there's no benefits having to rebuild your template every year. Now, let me dispel some myths for you. No matter what version of Archicad you use, I personally use the int version, and many of you in the room would be using the Australian version. The out-of-the-box template is not a template, okay? Now, Central Innovation, they may come and smack me about that, but let me explain. It is a basis to build on, okay? It isn't a template, it's a basis to build from. So the out-of-the-box template that is present within Archicad, no matter what version you get, it is kind of a roadmap as to how to use the software. It isn't a template to use. You need to customize it to the needs of your business. Index numbers, they rule the world. Now, how many people in the room do not know what index numbers are? That's not too bad. Does anyone, actually, let's just take that. How many people in the room understand attribute management and the challenges that you'll face if you don't manage your index numbers properly? All right. So for people that don't, I'm happy to have a conversation later about it because I don't want to go into detail about it, but the out-of-the-box materials and attributes are very critical to be maintained so that your template, people are ringing me at this time of the day and they expect me to answer. They're silly. If you don't understand and keep those in place, you actually have the chance to actually having more problems than it's worth. Okay, so we'll go through that in more details. The reason why is that you don't want to start deleting these attributes out of the out-of-the-box template. If you start doing that and replacing them with whatever you feel that's appropriate, you'll bring in an object from BIM object and it will have a lovely brick patch pattern on it. Has anyone experienced that before? Where you've brought in something because you've modified your template and all of a sudden you see, oh, that doesn't look right, I've got to edit it. And then you've got your CAD image drawn on Windows, and I remember dealing with that about 5 years ago, and all of the textures on all of the elevations are wrong, and you go, Why did I build this template so badly? The rule is modify. So with the existing attribute set, modify the naming to align with your naming convention in a similar represented material. Okay. If you have a different naming convention, you apply it, but don't delete them out, please. Otherwise, Central Innovation will end up having too many calls from users saying, Archicad's not working for me. This is what happens all the time. You're the problem. You are. You've made the mistake. It's a user error. It's not the software error. Now, as I talked about the whole concept of the game of chess, right? Your template needs to take into account the strategic direction of your business. It needs to take in the managerial processes of your business, and it needs to take into consideration the technical skills of your staff. It's a holistic approach. If you miss one component, essentially your template isn't going to stack up. So, strategically, and this is the whole thing that we're all revolve around, meeting your clients' deliverables. As a practitioner or user of Archicad, the fundamental you need to achieve with this tool, meeting your clients' deliverables. So you need to understand what exactly your clients' needs are, and that's all you build it for. You don't build it for this holistic idea of, oh, this would look really good if I build a template that could do this. It doesn't meet the deliverables. There's no value and benefit in doing that. You need to build it so it meets and aligns with the processes and other tools that you have in place. So as I said at the start, over the next couple of days, you're going to learn about a series of other that you can implement alongside of Archicad. Your processes within Archicad and your template need to align with that. So you have to take that into consideration. And technical. If you've got staff that aren't very skilled in using Archicad, there's no benefit in having a really highly complex template, right? It means that they'll crash and burn. So starting off with deliverables, right? So what determines a deliverable? First of all, our client type. So if you sit down and you map out the types of clients that you have, the project types, and the procurement type, those three things will typically determine the list of deliverables that you will have as an organisation and what you have to provide as an output. That's the fundamental thing you need to understand at the start. Now, times are changing. This is a diagram I've used for probably the last 6 years, but I still think it's highly relevant. Being in the room is a very important thing for you guys. You understand it, and that's why you're here to learn. It's the people that aren't in the room that are going to be the problem with industry moving forward. The thing is that if you try to follow the blue line, right? So we talked about deliverables at the start. If you try and follow the client's blue line where they go from nothing today, and then 2 years' time or a year's time, they say, I'd like to have a project delivered for FM. And you haven't taken the steps, you will falter. You need to have development within your business and processes developed in your business with key leaders. And those key leaders need to accelerate that so they're well ahead of client expectations and understand what's required. And then you bring your staff and your whole team up on the journey. Now, most people are aware of competitive tendering environments and procurement environments. If a client in the blue line comes to you and says, I'd like a project delivered for FM, and on your CV, under the responses of capability, of BIM capability, you turn around and say, no capability, never done a project before, can't do it. Your competitors walk up to the table and they've said, we've been doing this for the last 2 or 3 years. Who's going to win the job, right? So the key thing is having this all implemented and piloted before your clients actually need it. So you need a strategic mindset of understanding when that's going to be. Now, I don't know if Tasmania's got anything yet. People in the room are from these 3 states. Okay, so Queensland has now got a policy in place for projects over $50 million. And you'll start to see education projects even in Queensland being delivered well under that. New South Wales is handling projects in New South Wales Transport. They're handling it through New South Wales Health, and they're also handling it through education. So they're doing it more at an agency level rather than a holistic government approach. They're doing that already as well. And then in Victoria, we've got VDAS, and just recently, I think they might have released a second document in that series, but the green one's policy, the blue one in New South Wales is being delivered on live projects, and the Victorian approach is progressing, okay? So going back, you got to think of this, and you got to understand that this is coming, and realise that we're kind of almost in this Indiana Jones kind of stage of our career where that ball's coming for us. That big rock is going to come and hit you, right? Unless you've got an escape plan. So you've got to make sure you're prepared for when your clients are going to need this. Now, some people in the room say, well, actually, I don't do any work for any of the state government agencies. I'm a small practice. I just do work for private clients or developers. What you'll see is there's another organisation called VANSI, which is a virtual Australia, New Zealand. And what they are envisaging for all of Australia is a digital asset for every built asset across the country. So you're seeing it in local authorities right now up on the Sunshine Coast. Sunshine Coast Regional Council have a virtual Sunshine Coast, and development approvals are provided with 3D files. The exciting thing is that actually Andrew Zarb up there is using Archicad to manage all of that, which is really nice. But underneath that, we also have these two ISO standards, ISO standard 19650, which are referred to within all of these procurements or these policies that have been documented by these agencies, which take control of information deliverables back to the client. Now, this is where they should have been for some time, because the focus of our profession has been to provide information to enable a building to be built, and that's all our focus has been. But the duration of design and construction is only very, very short. It's only a couple of years, and a built asset has a lifespan of 50. So a client's obtaining these assets at the end with these crappy maintenance manuals that are either, big folders, or you're getting these massive PDFs that aren't text searchable, and they're just basically provided as, lump PDFs, which essentially becomes digital waste. These two standards set out the opportunity for clients to take an important step in this process and actually not only sit down with architects at the start of a project or a building design at the start of the project and say, this is what I want my building to be. Before the consultants are even engaged, they're sitting down with an information manager, and they're documenting the brief for what information is required and what specifics are required to be delivered by us as designers and contractors. So things are going to change. So strategic goals. So we've got to understand where everything is moving. Okay, so we've got to understand that, all right, outcome is that we need to think of a template, how it can meet our deliverables today, but also meet the deliverables for tomorrow. But then we have to wrap around at our managerial systems. Okay, now what are our managerial systems? There are a whole series of things to consider, okay, because implementing all of this is not just a simple one-step process. It needs to take into consideration a lot of detail in terms of, do we actually have the cash flow to be able to roll out all the hardware that's capable to deliver these services? Do we have the processes currently in place? If we don't have the process, how much time is it going to take someone to be offline to document and develop those processes? Do we actually have the right team structures to deliver this? Now, hydraulic consultants were caught out a couple of years ago because the way in which they worked was the designers would sit there and draw with 0.6 felt tip pens on big A1s in different colours, line drawings. They'd hand that to a drafts person, and the drafts person would sit there and then draw an AutoCAD. Moving into now, they're working in Revit, and the designers are actually having to model in Revit because the original draftees actually don't know the plumbing code, and the draftees are actually having to learn the plumbing code. So you've got to think of the dynamics of where your business is going to go with the team skills you're going to need. Quality assurance. Anyone that's doing work for state government obviously needs to be certified with ISO 9001. So therefore you need to have processes in place to guarantee that you have checks and balances in place to ensure that the quality of what you're producing as an output, you have processes in place to audit what's going on. And then obviously with our templates over here. So, strategic goals, we've covered off on that. We've talked about managerial systems, but then once we've got those in place, we have to have technical skills. Now, you have to take into consideration, and this is a broad kind of approach that I take with everything. BIM experience is one, okay? And understanding the concept of virtual modelling, be it SketchUp, Revit, Archicad. You've got to understand the number of years of industry experience, because a person that is new to the industry is going to obviously need a longer time to upskill. And a gauge for me also is whether or not someone's a registered architect, because the scary thing is that any registered architect in the room can go and design Queen's Wharf across the road and stamp their name on it. So that's the thing you need to be well aware of, that you can do that. And that's scary. But then also you need to take into consideration people's Archicad experience. Okay, so tying all of these things together, and all of these things need to be considered holistically to develop your template. And it's a lot to understand and take in. So we've all wrapped this up as a bundle, and everyone's falling asleep already. But what happens, the irony was, so I left Fulton Trotter at the end of June, and as an owner of the business, you have slightly different entitlements to that of an employee. So as part of my entitlements as departure, I was able to maintain the number of clients that I had, and I was entitled to take the IP that I developed in our template at Fulton Trotter. Now, I could turn around and be really stupid, right? I could turn around and go, okay, I'll start selling Fulton Trotter's template as my new Skewed template, right? But what I'm actually doing is I'm handing a Ferrari to people that needs a team to run the car, right? So in developing a template, you need to consider your business and how it operates, okay? So most people will understand to get one of those things around the track, and you listen to the Williams team in terms of what they have. They have, I think, 30 or 40 engineers back in the UK reading live telemetry, live as to how the car's responding. You've got guys on track, and you've got guys, mechanics, and you've got the driver. So if you look at that as a team, you've got the CAD operator or the BIM operator or the architect driving the car, and they have to be very precise. Every little movement you make can spin you off the track. But they have a team of people like BIM managers, model managers. They have people that can check and make sure that file's all doing what it's supposed to do. So most businesses probably don't need that. Hence why the Fulton Trotter template won't ever go out to market. Most people might need an e-bike. I need an e-bike these days. It's quite scary compared to what I used to be able to do on a push bike. But the reality of it is that you want a tool that you can jump on and deliver things really quickly and easily. But when you get to the hills, you want a bit of assistance. You want that little electronic kick to get you there. And that's what most people really, really need, because you start building something that's too complex, it needs too many people to manage it, and you don't want to crash into a wall. Now, I know most of the people that are true kind of, architects kind of view this type of event as, this is a geek fest only for people that want to model things. And I'm too much of an architect, I don't need to know that. And the problem is that at the kind of most, what would I call it? The most egotistical kind of point. Architects think that, clients come to us because the service that we deliver is design. That's what we've been employed for. The scary thing is, if you actually want to be completely honest with yourself, you look at your fee proposals, your design component's only worth about 10 to 15% of your overall fee. You know what we're actually engaged to do? So we're first of all engaged to design, but we are engaged to communicate our design. That's our service. That's the major part of our service. Our output is communicating the design firstly to our clients so that the clients can confirm that we've met their brief. Our design communication to the engineers that we're going to work with so that we don't end up with ugly protrusions and structure sticking where we didn't want it. It integrates nicely. All the services fit. We need to communicate to the authorities that they understand that our building is going to contribute in a positive way to the built environment. And then finally, we're communicating our design to the builders and subcontractors that build our designs to make it realised. So we have to think about that and understand that that is the fundamental output that we are producing and service that we're producing as designers. So, in my opinion, what makes up a template? So as I've talked about throughout all this, is that you've got to begin with the end in mind. So we're going to start, obviously we've done our assessment of our client types, we've understood all of the processes and our hardware limitations, we understand the technical skills of our staff. We start with information. Now fundamentally, if there's one thing that you do with your template, and people may disagree, if you actually focus on information first and make that the fundamental basis of your whole template, you actually will accelerate your BIM capability, all right? And you'll see why in a minute. So if you think about it, you want to build your template around getting the shortest route to an outcome. At the end of the day, if I was coming from Roma Street Station right now to walk here, I would have got really wet. But Google's given me 3 options. It's an algorithm in place that's got experience and knowledge, has told me 3 routes to get there. You have the person that's leading this charge within your practice needs to sit down and understand all of the idiosyncrasies, like all these cross streets. They're all of the different potential issues that could occur throughout the delivery of your project, all the critical time path issues, things that could come from the side and smack you out. You need to understand all of those so that you can make a template that enables your business to pick that shortest route, or has a bit of agile built into it. So you know what, there's a crash on that route, or someone's building something there, I can take this secondary route, which is going to take slightly longer, but I'm not going to crash and burn and go for a 30-minute walk. Now the key to all of this is understanding your users. Now, one of the fundamental things that I look at a lot is, in a template, you want your architects to focus on the architecture. You want the tool to assist the design and information generation process. You don't want them to have to change gears all the time and make extra decisions that are unnecessary. So you need to automate the flow of your template as best as possible. Now, the challenge is it's almost like you don't want to cut and paste. You know, you don't want to have to work in a scenario where you're basically chopping and changing all the time. You need to sit down and invest time at the start, think it through, and then work it out. You don't want to have this scenario where you're kind of chopping and changing all the time. It's almost like kind of measure twice and cut once type thing. Now, in all of this, the 80-20 rule applies. And anyone doesn't understand that? That's good. That's good. So you need to try and make sure that you're catering for 80% of, you're investing in your template to deliver 80% of the outcomes. But that said, you need to be aware of the potential for that other 20% to come and have an understanding of what effort and energy is going to be required to enable you to meet that extra 20%, because if you don't consider it, you could be working on a project that's in that 20% and you could find yourself in a situation where you're losing a lot of money. Bless you. So let's start with our information. Now, there are a myriad of different outputs you can get out of Archicad. So first of all, let's start. We've got models. And we have a couple of different model formats. And we could go into 3ds and all those sorts of other ways you can export it. But typically the type of exports from our models that we're doing on a daily basis or a weekly or fortnightly basis would be in the IFC or the BIMX realm. Then we're producing drawings, which is going to remain the fundamental deliverable probably at least for the next decade. And then we've obviously got PDF printed and DWG outputs of those. Moving into schedules. Now schedules, there's opportunities there where we're going to export them either in an Excel format or a text format. And then finally, images, and obviously perspectives and fly-throughs. So all of this is where you've got to start. Understand what your client's expectations are. All of these items on the right-hand side, circle them. These are the things that I need to deliver as a business, and then begin from there. So we're going to touch quickly on publishing because it's not really exciting, but I've seen practices that don't set publishing sets up, and I kind of think there's one process you could set up with your template that will save you hours on every project. Create a publisher set for each one of your information deliverables. So cover each one of those file types. Make sure that you're dealing with file renaming as you need to, and which you can include revisions. And then your file saving location. Now that might be a manual process that needs to occur on every project, but that's really the fundamental thing. Now, that means you can batch process the saving of all your documents. Now, setting this up on every single project is going to take you maybe half an hour to an hour on each project that you have each year. Now, the thing to take into note is this, you're going to have to adjust your save location for each project, unless you have a centralized publishing place, which I don't think people are going to have. So we've got 4 kind of quadrants to work to after we've dealt with the publishing side of things, okay? And we've got our models, our images, our schedules, and our drawings. So when we have a model, it's all nicely washed out on that screen, but if a model is a deliverable from a client, you have to start with a model execution plan, right? That needs to be in place if a client wants a deliverable for a model. If you don't actually have that in place, you need to get one, because if it's a contractual deliverable and it's just, oh, you need to deliver a model, you're actually opening yourself up to the potential of them saying, you didn't model this, 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 and this. Well, you didn't tell me I needed it to be modeled. Well, I said model it. You know, it's the famous, I'd like an LOD 300 or 400 model at the end as a deliverable. And you go, what did you actually want? So that model execution plan needs to include what is modeled, okay? Now, in scenarios where you have a full consultant team doing this and they may be engaged as sub-consultants or even secondary consultants, you need to know who's actually modeling it, because you want to be in a scenario where each one of your consultants is locked in to model what they're being engaged to model. And then you need to know when it's needed, because the last thing you want is to be modeling elements too early in the process when there's no need to. You know, if a client says, I want these skirtings modeled at concept design, you'll go, well, I'm going to move that wall 10 times. And it becomes a waste. So understanding that, by knowing this whole process, you can then set up how you're going to work and deliver it, okay? Now, to deliver a model requires a lot of thought and a lot of skill, because we're used to only modeling what's required to produce a set of drawings. So now we're actually needing to model what's actually going to be built everywhere. You can't kind of just build a model to suit your drawing. So what's built up of a model? So the first component is accurate geometry. And the second component accurate geometry is made up of native content, composites, complex profiles. So that's kind of, and then my last one, objects. So each of those are the kind of ways in which you build a model. The second most important thing is information. So we've got our attributes, we have our Archicad classification, which is pushed into IFC classification, and then we have our Archicad properties, which ideally then map into IFC properties. So that's kind of the workflow in which you should try to start to work with, working with the way Archicad is now developed. Now, I like a screen that doesn't go in order, but in terms of understanding the way a model has worked and how it's built up, our native elements, composites, and complex profiles are made up of building materials as their primary thing, and then surfaces. So they're the two kind of driving aspects behind what a model's made of. Our objects have a cut fill, and then that ties into a surface as well. Now, you know, first comment people are going to make is, well, actually, no, not anymore, because stairs and railings actually tie to building materials. So we do have this kind of startup, a crossover of where some objects are actually utilising building materials now. So, but essentially you need to consider building materials and cut fills as a similar attribute. Now, in terms of our model, we've got our objects and our building materials. That ties to a cut fill. So a cut fill, once again, is a primary attribute of a building material. And then underneath that we have pens. And once again, we're talking about surfaces. Now surfaces have a cover fill as well, and then they have pens. So overall, you got to get this model right, you actually have to start thinking of your attributes and the way that they go together. Now, as I said, you got to kind of think about these attributes, and once again, out of the box attributes, rename to suit your processes. So attribute names actually need to be meaningful names now. Now, I'll show you an example shortly, but if you have non-meaningful names, and my favorite is solid cut fill, or 100%, or empty. Now, when that goes out into Celebri, that's what the material is. It's quite exciting. Oh, look at this, nice example, but it's actually done right. So what we have here is, within Archicad, we have got a composite that is named in a naming standard that I've selected. We've provided a whole series of attributes to that wall, and then I've set up custom IFC mapping at the bottom there that I've utilised, which isn't out of the box. Now, we've got to think about this, because when we are dealing with models and we're issuing a model to a client, we need to think about the way in which attributes are named, because all of this information goes out. So right now, this is picked up directly out of Celebri. I haven't done any more mapping, but you can see all of that information is going out. So the problem is that you don't want to have those attributes named in a really odd, obscure way. And we'll talk about the benefits of obviously having meaningful attributes in another sense. Now, this is more detail of the composite. So I've developed a naming convention for all my attributes over there that I believe are going to be easy to utilise for labelling and then descriptions, so that someone understands what it is. But we're also going to see over here how that information does go out in Celebri as well. So that information goes out in IFC. So the second you have odd named elements or attributes that are not named with reasonable conventions, you're going to find yourself in a bit of strife. So meaningful attributes is your foundation of information, okay? So make sure that when you build your attribute settings, that they actually are meaningful, they actually have purpose, and actually descriptions that people outside of your team are actually going to understand. So a kind of a philosophy that I have, which is a base philosophy, which is different to our Fulton Trotter model, so you guys just close your ears. But a philosophy that I like to have is actually a building material name, a surface name, and a cut fill name, all having the same name, right? So this is the most basic of templates. Now, in many cases, we have a few scenarios where that's going to be different, where you have paint finishes. So paint finishes get applied to a material, so they have a unique naming category. But in an ideal scenario, a suggested naming that I kind of utilise is you have a code that you can utilise on your drawing as a short code. We have a space and a hyphen, then a description. So in this instance, I've got PBO1, which is plasterboard general. Now, what that enables me to do, and then cover fill. So obviously we have a cover fill to our surface. Now, with your cover fills, and it's a lot of duplication, I know, and people kind of go, why would you duplicate it? But it means that you can manage and identify how things work. But if you have a cover fill, you prefix it as a cover fill so that you can identify it, and once again, you have a clean, consistent attribute copy and paste across the whole spectrum. But then what that actually enables you to do, you can use Archicad Properties to split it, and then just use associative labels from that Archicad property to then generate your label over on the left-hand side. And then you can generate an interactive schedule to actually bring up that, so you can actually generate a legend, which is it's a neat and easy way to do it. Now, it's all good and well building up your attributes, but without favorites, it becomes a bit of a manual process. So we're talking about automating. So we want to be able to make a scenario where architects and building designers don't become information managers, right? So favourites, obviously, we talked about geometry. Set up your base geometry and then set up your base information. Now, the scary thing is I'm just going to click through all of these. But what you can see, a favourite needs to have all of these preset. And if you have all of those preset, what that means, and your favourite is put into a nice folder structure. Thankfully, Graphisoft 2 releases ago built a folder structure into their favourite system. It means that you can generate and maintain, 1,000 favourites. But by applying all of this stuff, it means that a person that's working in Archicad just needs to go and click on that favourite. All of this data is attached. It means that your model, if you have to do a model export, that's already preset. It's all going to happen. And your drawings and your documents, they're basically picking information that's going to actually work to generate your model, to generate your drawings. Now, some people would say, what's the point in me adding an Archicad classifications or any additional classifications, structural function, position or Kobe properties when I'm not doing any projects right now that BIM deliverables are required? The time it takes you to set that up in your favourite is minimal. It means that you're actually strategically setting up your template and your favourites so that you don't have to do it in the future once it becomes a requirement. So essentially you're saving yourself that effort in the future. And then you document this process so where you don't have a favourite set up for a particular element, the team member follows the process to create a new favourite for their project. But the idea is you want to have, once again, the majority of those favourites in place. So essentially for most of the time your team members are driving an automatic. Images, well, this is a hard one, but from an image creation perspective, we have obviously the internal engine and we have the external opportunities. In terms of perspectives, we're obviously trying to create scenes that are saved. So within Archicad, we have Cinema 4D where that may occur internally, but then we have to deal with our surfaces. Now, surface naming is one thing, which we talked about before in terms of getting the naming of that right. But the key thing is in terms of getting your surfaces right for BIMX, you want to get your exposure and your texture built into your surface and have that sorted right. Then for Cinema 4D, you obviously have your Cinema 4D settings that you've got to add to that as well. Because once again, if you're using if you're a business, so Full Throttle was highly complex, 10 directors, all wanted to do things differently. So we had a complex template that was essentially flexible, but enabled consistency as an output. If you're in a business where you have a really good palette of materials that you're constantly using, you can build up really good textures and surfaces already baked into your template. So you can almost get these outputs almost, I wouldn't call it for free, but essentially it's automated. Once it's already resolved, you don't have to go and do it a second time. And then for obviously Enscape and Twinmotion, which we'll learn more about this afternoon, you want to get your texture right. And then sitting in terms of texture sizes, just be careful with the size of those. Don't make them any bigger than 4,000 by 4,000 pixels. Schedules, there's a whole pile of things you can get from your schedules. To get good information in your schedules, you need to have good geometry and you need to have good attributes. If you don't have either of those, your schedules are going to be useless. So interactive schedules, we could use those for legends, we could use them for material schedules, we can use them for finisher schedules. Quantities, auditing is a really good one. Door and window schedules, which you can learn about the experiments and problems with trying to get those to work. It's just fun. And games, fittings and fixture schedules. So it's a broad amount of ideas that you can get out of it, and other practices may have other needs or other outcomes they may achieve from it as well. So underlying, model it accurately geometrically so you can get the right quantities out. Modeling it with using a good attribute settings enable you to get all of the other stuff out of it. Now, when we come to drawing, so if we're modeling everything correctly, we've got to think about that, right? So if we're modeling everything correctly, has everyone heard the saying, every line has a meaning? Yeah? So on a drawing, you've got to think about every line and what it produces and what someone's going to think. A rule of thumb that I have is every 2D effort is a potential conflict. So every time someone draws a line or draws a fill or draws anything on there that isn't, or even, I call it dumb text, it might be a smart comment, it might be actually meaningful text that you're putting there, but if it's not associative, it's dumb. You don't want 2D conflict, you don't want to have conflict. You know, the time it takes to place a this is kind of a bit ironic, but say for example you're putting expansion joints into a slab. The time it takes to draw a 10 millimetre by 100 millimetre beam and place it, if it was a favourite, on your slab with the correct attribute saying that it's an expansion joint of a certain type, you can actually associatively label that rather than drawing a line and then writing dumb text over the top of it. So, and the next added bonus is that someone can actually measure that now. A quantity surveying software can actually get a benefit out of what you're doing with that. I like my manual notes. They kill me every time, but the benefit of having a strong attribute base means that you can label everything and associate that label to it. So if you're making a change to an attribute in your model, every single drawing that you have a note relevant to that actual element will change across your whole documentation set. So it's really nice. The rule of thumb I have is model where possible. Original rule used to be, if you see it in more than 2 views, model it. My view is that if you're going to draw 2D, you question whether you're going to draw it in 2D now, and you'd actually kind of look to do it the other way around and model it where possible. Obviously, you've got to take into consideration geometry and polygon count that you're going to add to your model. You've got to think about that and weigh that up as well. Meaningful attributes enable associative labeling. So that's just the key fundamental, I think, to every time I talk about templates. If you get that basis right, it gives you a very strong springboard to actually build everything else in your template that's actually going to be meaningful. Now, with drawings and your layout book, I take a slightly different approach. Instead of the 80-20 rule, I take a 95-5% rule. So like, for example, if you are a practice that typically delivers 95% of your projects are 2 stories or less, put a 3rd story in. Okay? So put that 1 extra story in than you would actually normally be delivering on a daily basis, because to set up all of your views, it's a lot easier to have a deletive process than an additive one, because the time it takes to delete 10 drawings out of your layout book with all of those associated views is, 5 minutes versus right click, create view, create view, create view, or even, when people are using the mirror function of when a story is created, the views automatically populate a folder full of those different views for each story. But don't go crazy. There's a great template that's created from Link Ellis over in the UK from BIM 6SX, but he kind of generates 1 billion link. It's funny, his name's Link Ellis, and he kind of has 1,000 linked views into his template, but don't go that crazy. Just build a little bit more than what you normally would need, because it's so much easier to delete. So with our views, we have our drawings, and then we have layer combinations. And ideally, I try to use layer combinations and name them to match the view type. So essentially, you have that aligned. Then we have scale, which is what it is, structural display. I typically now, with all of these projects that I work on, show the whole lot. It means that when you have wall build-ups off the structure, you don't have a toilet sitting 100-odd millimetres in space, and you just adjust the line weight of the pen set on those drawings to essentially get the right output. You set up your pen sets. Some people like having 1 pen set. I'm a preferer of having 1 pen set for each view type, so you can actually control highly finite weights of your pens. You can use graphic overrides, I guess, if you wanted to achieve a different outcome. Model view options, once again, setting them up for each view type. Gosh, someone's unhappy with me, it's raining heavier every second. Graphic overrides, once again, setting them up. Even if they're just named and they're empty, you're having something set up so that when you can then set up an audit, you can then set up an audit of all your views to be able to then check whether or not it's actually what it's supposed to be. So the idea is I try to create all of them in a like-named manner. So what that means is you can actually audit all of your views then to see that someone's got the settings right. because what happens is that in a rush, a junior's setting up your drawings because you get the most junior person to do that. I don't know why, it's an important deliverable. But by doing that, you can open up the schedule and check across it to make sure that everything's got the right setting based upon the view type. Title block, you know, really simple stuff, but it's something you have to consider. And building up master layouts that align with all your different deliverables. You know, these are the kind of the really small things, but they are important to actually getting it right. Layout sheets, once again, setting up your master layouts and layout folders. You know, people like arguing with me about layout folders, I don't know. I know a few boys like arguing with me about layout folders because of different workflows, but the layout folders enable you to get automated numbering in your layout sheets rather than manually numbering them all, which can be quite tedious on large jobs. Oh, in conclusion, if you're going to do it on more than one project, build it into your template, because the key thing about all of this is you're trying to reduce duplication in a more and more competitive time. You know, I've having conversations with this guy who is from this practice in Melbourne, who's on Revit, and they are outsourcing a lot of their documentation to Asia. And by doing so, it's actually making them competitive to actually enough to win a lot of projects. And what that's going to mean is that if we are remaining ourselves as local practitioners, not outsourcing to other countries that have cheaper labour, we need to find ways in which we can be competitive with our fee and not waste time doing tasks twice. Index numbers, once again, they rule the world. You've got to be very careful with your attribute management, you know, and it's very important that you don't play around with the out-of-the-box attributes and delete them. Meaningful. So please, you know, I keep talking about meaningful attributes. It's probably tattooed on my forehead by now, but the key thing about that is that if you get that right, it sets a very strong position for your whole platform of moving your skills forward within your business, okay? And it means that if you get your attributes right, it means that you can label your drawings and get associative labels. It means that you will be able to, with a few other steps, be able to send models out to your collaborating partners and meet deliverables and be meaningful when people open it at the other end. So one thing I haven't generated yet, but I will put onto Notion for you, is a little spreadsheet with the international attributes in an XLSX file. So therefore you can sit down and go, okay, so these are the current attributes that are in each of these sectors, and going to build a brand new template, what would you do and how would you map it out? So it's a nice little file to play with. But most of all, you know, and this is the kind of whole thing, think about where you have to think about where your business is today, and you have to think about where your business is going to be in a few years' time, because any time you spend on investing in building a template, you want to get a return on investment. You don't want to have to go and do it again and again and again, because, you know, justifiably, a new release of Archicad comes out every 12 months or so. You know, it comes out every year. And there are new features that are implemented into the tool each year, and your template needs to be adjusted to meet those requirements as it is. So you don't want to be adjusting your template to meet the new features and then adjusting your template to meet your new requirements that you hadn't considered when you built your template in the first place. So if you don't want to be building your attribute list every year. It's kind of painful. Anyway, I hope I covered off on the topics that are in the CPD questions for people that are interested. Otherwise, the information should be within the handout. Thanks very much. Any questions? I think I'm on time. Any questions at all? No. So the question for people that couldn't hear, is there an ability within the publishing set to have the renaming set up within the publishing? Yes, it is. So if you have all of your views set up within your publishing set, you go to the parent folder of the views that you're trying to publish, and you can rename them in the set order that you would like them to be renamed. So it's all very achievable, yes. Anything else? Yes, yes. So FM is the facilities management. So more so, what we're going to see, we're seeing it already on some projects in Queensland where clients will be actually dictating information requirements. Now, what that might even mean, and this is something where kind of agile approach is going to be required, some clients may actually stipulate the naming convention of attributes that get sent to them. They may stipulate, well, I want this called this particular way. The index numbers that you use within Archicad may have to follow certain formats that they want to have followed for their CAFM tools. So that's where you have to build something so that you can document for today and document on a trajectory. But there's going to be times and occasions whereby your clients may come to you at the start, and ideally it's before you start. And so this is how we want the information given back to us. And by doing so, you can assess at the start of that project how much energy and effort is going to be required to essentially meet that requirement that the client stipulated in terms of, do I change all of my attributes? Or B, do I maintain my attributes so my drawings stay the same, and then I implement Archicad Properties, which we'll learn about a little bit later today, and then set up customized IFC mapping so that those Archicad properties give the client what they want. So there's going to be different ways around it, but it all comes down to having a path that you have as a practice that delivers consistency and as much automation, I kind of call it, in terms of, or standardized deliverables as possible. And then once you have that in place, the second component of that is being able to understand and adapt to those client needs on an individual needs basis. Because the sad thing will be is that we're in a country, we're not in the UK, and you just need to be on Twitter to see how much the guys in the UK fight over a single word in a standard. It's quite amazing. Whereas here in Australia, there's no standards for anything, and we all just deliver things the way that we think's right. Now, if I had my way, and I live in an optimistic world, and I'm not a socialist, but imagine a scenario where in Australia there was only one template we used for Archicad, and we all had to deliver this information the same way. Now, in my mind, that's a great kind of approach to making it really easy for us to, as all organisations, to do things the same way. But architects are creative. We all like doing things differently. Each drawing has to have our own unique signature on it. It's going to look a particular way. So it's going to be, it's never going to happen. Anything else? Yep.
How do you manage the migration of actions?
So it's a tricky one. The international template between releases has got some additional attributes. I know that over in North America right now, there's lots of anger about the index numbers changing over in that. An approach that we used to take at full throttle was basically take our attributes and just keep rolling it over. In an ideal scenario in terms of migration, I like to start, you have to rebuild some parts, but it's in terms of, well, I guess we'll take a couple of steps. So the first step, why I use the international version over the Australian version, and it's no disrespect to central innovation, but the international template is the base template that's generated from Graphisoft in Hungary. All of the localizations are contributed to and edited by the local regions. So central innovation build the Australian template. I work with the international one because I know that's the more chance that that's actually going to align with any external content that we bring in, and has the potential to be less potentially buggy because it's what was produced from the base. And here we go. Yep. Yeah. So that's the way that they can provide that. I typically build from scratch and copy use attributes to copy across, and that way it's a clean build, because I have seen in the past where you basically open up, you just take your template, open it up in the new release, and then make modifications to it, and it actually creates bugs within the software sometimes. It does happen. So what you're trying to do is start from a stable platform where you as a user aren't going to contribute to the bugs that occur within the software. Anything else? So the approach I take is to rename existing to a similar, like if it's called brick, or I can't remember what, one of them might be called masonry or something, and I want to call it blockwork. So I'll change masonry to blockwork and try and work within the existing attributes, and then add after that, directly after that. Because, because if you leave a gap and then someone starts importing, attributes kind of sneak in between the gap, which is a really big problem to try and find. And then you've got scenarios right now where, I appreciate the efforts that Boral have gone to, but manufacturers that go out and generate their own content, they've started their attributes, I think, at 1,000, and assume that they're the only manufacturer out there, and create their own custom properties, their own custom building materials, all these different custom things. And I'm like, but do you understand how Archicad fundamentally works with attributes? So attributes are the biggest flaw within the software, in my opinion, in terms of how you can work with it easily. But at the same time, if you understand the challenges with that as a part of the tool and build on it, you can maximize your value out of it. But I know Link's template over in the US, I think they start their own custom attributes at 600 or something like that. I think that if you have out-of-the-box attributes that you leave sitting there that are named differently to your own attributes, there's a chance that someone will go and use that wrong one, and it won't go out the way you want. So you've got to go through and cleanse. It's kind of like just a polish of what's existing. You don't want to wipe it off the planet or ignore it and then start something fresh, because if you do that, you cause all sorts of potential problems for your users. All good? All right.